Black woman denied seat by Karen's designer bag. Moments later, the airline regrets everything. "You can't sit here," the woman snapped. "This seat's taken." The words landed like a slap. Ava Brooks paused, her hand still gripping the handle of her carry-on as she stared at the plush leather seat labeled 3A. Draped across it, sprawled without care, was a pristine white Hermes Birkin bag, crocodile leather, gold hardware, and arrogance stitched into every seam. "I'm sorry," Ava replied, her voice calm but firm. Karen Whitmore didn't even glance up from her phone. Her platinum hair was perfectly coiffed, and the massive diamond on her ring finger flashed like a warning light. One manicured hand adjusted her oversized Gucci sunglasses, and the other remained resting on the Birkin, like it was a throne. "I said," Karen repeated, now louder, "this seat's taken. You should try coach. That's more your vibe anyway." A soft wave of murmurs rolled through the first-class cabin. Some passengers smirked behind their coffee cups. One man in a tailored gray suit whispered, "Figures," just loud enough for Ava to hear. Phones began to lift quietly. No one intervened. Ava stood tall in her fitted navy blue blazer, crisp white blouse, and pressed slacks. Her locks were pulled back into a low bun, and her expression never wavered. She reached into her blazer pocket and retrieved her boarding pass. 3A, she said, holding it in front of her. "This is my seat." Karen finally looked up. Her eyes traveled slowly over Ava's face, down to her shoes and back up again. Her smile was thin, the kind you wear when you're used to winning. "I'm sure there's been a mistake," she said, voice coated in syrup. "People like you don't usually fly up here." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The flight attendant at the front of the cabin, Melanie, noticed the tension and began making her way over, her smile forced and her steps hesitant. "Excuse me," Ava said again, more firmly now. "I need to sit down." Karen rolled her eyes, then let out a dramatic sigh, clearly meant for an audience. "This is harassment," she said to Melanie as she arrived. "I feel unsafe. He's threatening me." Melanie blinked. Ma'am, I didn't see any threatening behavior. Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Karen shoved her phone into her Birkin, yanked her designer tote from the seat with theatrical force, and held up her own ticket. 3C, she said. Melanie blinked again, glancing at both passes. "Ma'am, your seat is 3C. This seat, 3A, is Ms. Brooks." Karen's nostrils flared. "I won't sit next to her." "Excuse me?" Ava asked, voice level but cool. Karen turned her head slowly. "You heard me." Another passenger in 2B discreetly filmed the exchange. Ava caught the angle of the phone. It didn't matter. She knew what this looked like, but not what it was about to become. "Ms. Brooks," Melanie said, her voice tight, "would you mind stepping off the plane for just a moment? We'd like to resolve this privately." Ava said nothing for a long moment. She could feel every eye on her, watching, judging. She could feel the pressure behind Melanie's polite smile. She could feel the old familiar burn in her chest, the one that came with swallowing dignity to maintain peace. But this time she didn't swallow it. Still, she nodded once. "Of course." She wheeled her suitcase back down the aisle, past Karen, past the silent passengers, past the watching phones. Her heels clicked against the jet bridge as she stepped into the cool air of the terminal corridor. At the end of the bridge, she stopped, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out a sleek black phone. Unlocked it with a thumbprint. Dialed. A voice answered instantly. "This is Brooks," she said. "Initiate protocol Blackbird. I want full spectrum observation. Begin now." "Yes, ma'am," came the reply. "We're already tracking passenger behavior and internal comms. BGI command is online. Ava ended the call and slipped the phone away. She stood for a moment in the sterile quiet, staring back down the bridge toward the aircraft. The rage didn't show on her face, but it was there, refined, disciplined, dangerous. No one on that plane knew who she was. And that was the point. Back in the cabin, Karen sipped her champagne and laughed lightly with the man beside her. "Honestly," she said, "the nerve of some people." Melanie stood at the front, wringing her hands. She whispered with the captain and purser Alan as tension spread like smoke. The boarding was paused. Passengers murmured. On a screen in Skylux Holdings Operations Center in Chicago, alerts began to blink. Protocol Blackbird. Active. Ethan Harper, Director of Strategic Operations, glanced at the monitor and straightened. "We've got a live one," he said to the room. His assistant, Tessa, tapped at her keyboard. Full identity match confirmed. Ava Simone Brooks, Executive Chair, BGI Aviation Group. Everyone in the room froze for half a second. Then the room erupted into motion. "Lock down Regalis Airlines internal comms," Ethan ordered. "Begin tracking cockpit chatter. Scrape every passenger manifest from the last 24 hours. If this is what I think it is, we're going to war in a 3-piece suit." Tessa's fingers danced across the keys. "Command authority granted. Passive surveillance engaged. Shall we prep external response?" "Not yet," Ethan replied. "Let it burn just a little longer." Back on the aircraft, Melanie approached Karen again, now visibly flustered. "Ma'am," she began carefully, "we've had a request to reseat you. Ms. Brooks has a confirmed ticket, and the manifest—" Karen's smile vanished. "You people are unbelievable. You'd seriously take her side over mine." "I'm following policy," Melanie said, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen stood, her heels clicking hard against the floor. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Do you have any idea who I am?" From row 2A, a man muttered under his breath, "No, but I think she's about to find out who the other woman is." Karen turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "Never mind," he said. "You'll figure it out soon enough." Outside the aircraft, Ava stood still. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. "Phase 1 complete. Full data integration in progress. Awaiting your signal." Ava smiled. Just barely. The seat hadn't been the issue. It never was. But now the airline was about to learn that the woman they had asked to leave the plane was the one person they should have protected at all costs. And the countdown had just begun. The door of the aircraft clicked shut behind Ava as she stepped off, her heels landing softly against the carpeted jet bridge. The sterile lighting above cast a faint glow on the smooth steel walls. For a moment she stood still, composed, unreadable, as if she were simply taking in the morning air. But inside, a different storm brewed. She walked a few feet forward, away from the plane, just far enough that the cameras behind her couldn't see the glint of steel in her eyes. Her phone buzzed again, a second message blinking across the screen. "Blackbird status, active. Gate 42 surveillance online. Cabin audio feed stable. Social media mentions rising." Ava exhaled slowly, not with frustration, with calculation. Inside the aircraft, Karen took another smug sip of her champagne. The bubbles danced in her glass like triumph. She crossed her legs, casually leaned into the seat, and tilted her phone to record another video. "Some people don't know their place," she said sweetly into the camera, her smile sharp enough to slice marble. "Thankfully, the staff here at Regalis does." Behind her, Melanie stood near the front galley, still shaken. She whispered to Purser Allen, whose brow was furrowed with the weariness of someone already sensing the weight of bad decisions. Passengers shifted in their seats. A man at 2B gave Karen a sharp side glance. A woman in 4D texted furiously, her phone screen visible. White lady kicked a black woman out of her seat, and staff let her. WTF is this airline doing? In the airport terminal, Ethan Harper stepped into the control suite at Skylux's West Coast operations hub. The room was dimly lit, filled with screens and hushed urgency. Ava's call had already triggered a full protocol lockdown. His team worked quietly but swiftly, tracking every whisper, every digital footprint, tied to Flight 3 and social media engagement up 70%, said Tessa from across the room. The name Karen is trending alongside Birkin and denied seat. Surveillance audio confirms multiple bystanders recorded the incident. We'll have clips within the hour. Any movement from the flight crew? Ethan asked, eyes locked on the cabin feed. They're stalling, Tessa replied. Purser Allen appears nervous, captain still unaware of Ava's identity. Ethan smirked. Good, let them stew in it. Back at the jet bridge, Ava's phone vibrated again. She tapped the side of her AirPod and answered. Serena here, said a steady voice. We have an update. Go, Ava said, voice low. Karen Whitmore, age 38, heiress to Whitmore Capital Trust. Multiple complaints filed in the last 5 years on 3 different airlines. 2 settled quietly, 1 ongoing. No fly list was recommended in a 21 internal memo from Skyline Pacific. Never actioned. Ava's jaw clenched, barely. Send me the files. Flag every previous employee involved. Done. And Ava. Serena paused. There's more. The gate agent, Kendra Tillman. She's the one who reassigned your seat last minute this morning. No explanation. Ava's eyes narrowed. Dig into that. Now, on the aircraft, the captain, a tall man in his late 50s with a voice made for authority, stepped out of the cockpit and glanced around the first-class cabin. Something wasn't sitting right. He approached Melanie and Alan with the crisp gait of a man who had seen his share of turbulence, both in the air and on the ground. Give me the manifest, he said quietly. Alan handed over the tablet, his eyes lingering on seat 3A. She's gone, he muttered. Asked her to step off. Temporary. The captain scanned the name. Brooks, Ava Simone. Then he stopped. He looked up. Wait, Ava Brooks, as in... Alan blinked. You know her? The captain didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved slowly over the cabin, landing on Karen, who was now smugly flipping through a glossy fashion magazine like she'd never caused a scene in her life. Call corporate, the captain said tightly. Now. In the jet bridge, Ava leaned against the wall as Serena's secure file downloaded. She opened the first complaint against Karen, racially charged language to an attendant in 2019. Settled. The second, accused of spitting on a passenger during boarding at Heathrow. Denied. The third, refusal to comply with federal mask mandates, claiming VIP status. Ongoing, pattern, arrogance, and no consequences. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came in a short, buried memo from 21, a quietly logged HR note. Passenger Karen Whitmore displays consistent behavior indicating entitlement and disregard for FAA regulation. Recommended for special observation. Suggest addition to private risk list. Status vetoed. Vetoed by a former board member of Regalis Airlines. Ava's eyes didn't blink. Her heart rate stayed level, but her next words, spoken through the AirPod, were glass. Move to escalation protocol, flag the board, notify legal. And Serena, pull the gate agent's employment file. I want to know who she takes lunch with. Back inside the plane, Melanie received a call from ground ops. She paled. Her hand trembled slightly as she handed the phone to Alan. Who is she? Alan whispered after a pause. Melanie stared straight ahead. "She's not just a passenger," she said. "She's the woman who signs our paychecks." Alan's eyes went wide. The captain's jaw tightened. "And Karen?" Karen laughed loudly, her voice ringing across the cabin. "What's the holdup? Surely we can leave the drama behind and get in the air. Some of us have important meetings." Her voice was syrupy, her smile weaponized, but no one was laughing anymore. Ava's absence wasn't a defeat. It was a warning. And every second they delayed, the clock ticked toward a reckoning none of them were ready for. The air inside the cabin had shifted, not just tense, uncertain. The kind of quiet that comes when people realize they're no longer just bystanders, but part of a storm they didn't see coming. Karen adjusted her sunglasses as if shielding herself from the sudden change in mood. She glanced around and frowned. Eyes were on her. Not just glances, stares, silent, heavy, and loaded. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "She throws a tantrum and I'm the one who gets judged?" She tried to brush it off with another sip of champagne, but even the glass trembled slightly in her fingers. Back on the jet bridge, Ava stood near the window, sunlight streaking across the side of her face. She was calm, still, calculating. Her phone buzzed with another message from Serena. "Confirmed. Gate agent Kendra Tillman is niece of Regalis board member Douglas Tillman. Seat assignment override logged manually. Audit trail scrubbed." Ava read it once, exhaled slowly, then spoke into her AirPod. "Begin Phase 2. Release soft hold on operational cues. Let them feel the slowdown." "Yes, ma'am." Just like that, across Regalis's network, a slow but deliberate cascade began. Not dramatic, not yet. Just enough latency to confuse ground crews, stall boarding groups, delay passenger manifests. One gate in Dallas blinked red. 2 in Atlanta reported stuck kiosks. The ripple effect had started. Inside Flight 316, Alan approached the captain again, this time with a message on his tablet. "Sir, corporate escalation request just came in. Board level ping." And a name came up. The captain read it, his jaw stiffened. "Brooks. Ava Simone Brooks." He looked toward the jet bridge, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just about a seat. It never had been. This was about something much larger, and they were now at the center of it. "Get me Regalis HQ and loop in PR and legal. Now." Alan nodded and stepped back. Meanwhile, Karen had started to notice the shift too, the murmurings, the glances. A woman across the aisle had her phone tilted subtly, filming. A man in the row behind her was whispering with someone, and she caught a word that made her stomach turn. "CEO." Her lips parted. "No way," she said aloud, her voice cracking the tension. "No way she's someone important." She walked on like she didn't own a thing. The woman across from her gave a slight shrug. "Doesn't mean she isn't the one who owns the plane." Karen's breath caught. She stood abruptly, her voice louder now. "Excuse me," she called to Melanie, who looked up wearily. "Has the airline clarified who that woman was? The one you asked to leave?" Melanie hesitated. For the first time, she didn't have a script to fall back on. Karen pressed. "Because if this is some kind of setup, if someone's trying to humiliate me, I want to know right now." Melanie didn't answer, not because she didn't want to, but because her radio earpiece had just delivered something that made her knees weak. Board directive. Passenger 3A confirmed as Executive Chair, BGI Holdings. Absolute authority. Flight crew subject to audit. Melanie's throat went dry. Karen stepped closer. "Well, say something." But Melanie didn't. She turned and walked toward the front galley without a word. In the Skylux operations hub, Serena's team continued coordinating with internal AI sweeps. Messages from passengers were now being flagged in real time. One tweet from a lawyer in 2D had already hit 40,000 retweets. Black woman removed from first-class seat for a purse. I hope Regalis has a good legal team. The hashtags were gaining traction. The bag seat, #justice. In the air, #CEO clapback. In Regalis' New York headquarters, Mark Helton, the acting CEO, stormed into the executive crisis room. "What's the damage?" he barked. A junior analyst didn't hesitate. "Minimal for now, but trending fast. And sir, the passenger is Ava Brooks. She's activated a high-level protocol. We're not in control of the systems anymore." Helton froze. "What do you mean we're not in control?" "She has root clearance on our operations," another replied. "She designed the fail-safes in our aviation architecture. We can't stop this unless she lets us." Outside Flight 3 West, Ava watched a young gate agent tap repeatedly at a terminal, clearly confused. The boarding line for the next flight wasn't moving. Screens were flickering. Phones were ringing. Ava didn't smile, but she did step forward, slowly, and reached into her pocket again. She tapped one message. "Proceed to Phase 3. Flag public communications. Secure cabin recordings." Then she spoke, almost to herself. "They're about to understand that silence is a luxury they no longer have." And inside the cabin, Karen sat down hard in her seat, her throat suddenly dry, her heart beginning to pound for reasons she couldn't yet explain. Something had changed. The woman she had dismissed had never raised her voice, never made a scene. But somehow Karen was now the one feeling smaller by the second. Is she really someone important? The question came from a man in 4B, whispered to his seatmate, but in the pin-drop silence of the cabin, everyone heard it. Karen froze mid-scroll. Her phone, which she had just used to take a smug photo of her Birkin reclining solo in 3A, now felt heavier in her hand. Her champagne sat untouched. Across the aisle, a woman in her 60s leaned closer to her husband. "I heard one of the attendants say she's executive something, like at the top." "I thought she was just another passenger," someone else muttered. "Guess not." Karen's jaw tightened. She turned to Melanie, who was walking briskly down the aisle, tablet in hand. "Excuse me," Karen said, louder than necessary. "Is someone going to explain why we're not moving?" Melanie paused, but her expression was different now. Stiff, uncomfortable. "We're experiencing an operational delay," she said, voice tight. "We appreciate your patience." Karen narrowed her eyes. "No, I don't appreciate anything. I demand to know why I'm being kept on this plane like a prisoner. What's going on?" Melanie didn't answer. She simply gave a curt nod and disappeared into the front galley. For the first time since boarding, Karen felt it, loss of control, the growing weight of something turning against her. She opened her phone, began typing a message to her father's legal team. "Need immediate counsel. Maybe targeted. Situation escalating. Possible defamation." She hovered over the send button, but then she saw it. Her own face, frozen in a screenshot already posted on X. A user had uploaded a clip, 30 seconds, captioned, "Lady blocks black woman's seat with Birkin, refuses to move, says, 'People like you don't belong here.'" Karen stared, numb. Underneath, the replies multiplied by the second. She's about to learn. The woman she kicked out is Ava Brooks? Oh no, not just kicked the CEO out, she kicked the owner out. Owner? Karen felt her chest tighten. She read the words again. The name, Ava Brooks. The flight attendant returned a moment later with Alan, who was now visibly tense. "Ma'am," he began, voice even, "you'll need to remain in your seat. The airline is reviewing the incident." Karen scoffed. "Reviewing what?" That I asked someone to leave my seat because she looked suspicious? That silence again. The kind that said too much. Alan cleared his throat. The passenger in question, Ms. Brooks, holds executive authority at BGI Holdings. Karen blinked. Wait, she's with the airline? Alan met her gaze. She is the airline. The words slammed into her like a cold wave. Karen laughed, a short, hollow sound. That's not possible. She walked in here like a regular person. She was alone. No entourage, no staff. That's how she travels, Alan said, deliberately. Karen's face flushed, not just from embarrassment, but from the heat of something more primal, fear. The kind of fear that comes when a person who thought they ruled the room realizes they've grossly misread the balance of power. Back in the jet bridge, Ava stood motionless, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her phone buzzed. Ethan here, came the voice in her ear. Phase 2 results. 5 delays in major hubs, Regalis reservation system slowing down, internal inquiry already opened by legal. Board chatter is escalating. Good, Ava said. Hold Phase 3. Not yet. Understood. One more thing. You asked us to pull the footage? I did. It's damning. Karen said exactly what the passengers are reporting. 3 separate recordings from different angles, all live now. Ava didn't blink. Secure and archive. Begin metadata sweep. We're going to use this. Back inside the aircraft, Melanie pulled Alan aside. Regalis HQ just contacted the cockpit. CEO Helton wants real-time updates. They're scared. Alan swallowed. They should be. In New York, Mark Helton stood with his sleeves rolled up, pacing a boardroom full of sweating executives. The wall screen displayed a dashboard. Social media mentions spiking, sentiment overwhelmingly negative, clips circulating across platforms. Who authorized the seat reassignment? He barked. Gate agent Kendra Tillman, someone replied. Manual override. She's related to... I don't care who she's related to, Helton snapped. Find her. Suspend her. Now. Another screen lit up. A secure call request. Serena Vaughn, BGI Operations, said the assistant. She wants to speak, directly. Helton took a breath, composed his face, and accepted the call. Ms. Vaughn, he said. We're already aware, Serena cut in. Her tone was smooth, sharp as glass. Regalis has 15 minutes to issue an internal freeze on all public comms. We're coordinating from BGI. We expect cooperation, and we expect silence. Or what? Helton said, trying to steady his voice. You already know, Serena replied. You've seen what happens when we don't stay ahead of a storm. The call ended before he could respond. Back in 3A, Karen sat rigid, her Birkin now abandoned on the floor. A soft ping sounded. Melanie approached with a calm but unreadable expression. Ms. Whitmore, she said gently, corporate has requested you be escorted off the aircraft. Karen blinked. What? No. No, I'm not leaving. Melanie didn't argue. She simply stepped aside, revealing 2 plainclothes security officers behind her. We'll escort you discreetly, one of them said. This is insane, Karen hissed, rising from her seat. I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten anyone. I just said... You said enough, someone muttered from the back. Karen turned, searching for an ally, but found only silence. She was alone. As she walked down the aisle, head high but steps faltering, Ava remained still at the end of the jet bridge. And when Karen passed her, their eyes met, one filled with shame, the other with something far stronger. Unshaken, unapologetic. Ava didn't need to speak, because power, when true, doesn't have to shout. The The jet bridge door hissed shut behind Karen with a finality that echoed louder than any slamming gate. Her heels clacked sharply on the floor as she was escorted past silent ground staff, her head held high but her face flushed. She avoided every glance, every lens. She knew what was happening. She had gone viral, again. But this time it wasn't just a few judgmental looks or a petty comment thread. This was different. There were murmurs in the terminal, phones held up, people whispering her name before she even passed by. She felt it. This wasn't just a moment. This was a reckoning. And somehow she could feel the eyes of that woman, Ava Brooks, still on her. Across the glass inside the terminal, Ava stood watching Karen's departure through the tinted window. She didn't move. Her posture was quiet but unshakable. Karen looked up, just once, and their eyes locked for a brief moment. No gloating, no anger, just presence. And that was worse. On the other end of the terminal, Serena's voice echoed through Ava's earpiece. Surveillance review complete. We have full documentation of the incident. Passenger recordings match internal audio. No room for ambiguity. Also, we've pulled Tillman's override history. This wasn't her first reassignment. We've got a pattern. Ava's voice was calm. Flag every incident. I want the legal team reviewing it before day's end. Understood. You want us to push the media lever? Not yet. Let them come to us. Inside Flight 37, Melanie stood before the remaining passengers, doing her best to maintain control. We apologize for the delay, she said into the cabin mic. We've had an unexpected situation involving seating and boarding protocol. We will begin reboarding shortly. A few polite nods, a few sharp glares, but mostly silence. The cabin knew. Everyone knew. A woman in 2C leaned over to the man next to her. That lady got herself kicked off by the CEO, she whispered. I mean, who blocks a seat with a purse and calls security over nothing? The man shrugged. Guess she forgot who owns the sky. Back in New York, CEO Mark Helton stood in his office, staring at the flood of alerts on his monitor. Trending hashtags, legal pings, stock price tickers flickering with instability, and then a notification he dreaded. Urgent, board meeting requested, emergency session, 12:00 p.m. His assistant peeked in, nervous. Sir, it's happening. They've looped in BGI Holdings. He rubbed his forehead. Tell them I'll be on the call. Then another notification hit. Video footage from the cabin. Leaked. Ava never raised her voice, never made a scene. Karen did all the talking, and now the world was listening. Within the hour, Regalis Airline's PR team issued a generic statement. We take all customer concerns seriously and are currently investigating the incident aboard Flight 316. We are committed to ensuring every traveler is treated with dignity and respect. But the comments flooded in instantly. Investigating? It's all on camera. A purse had more rights than a black woman. Let that sink in. You kicked out your boss. Good luck with that. Serena's voice returned in Ava's ear. Statements live, public not buying it. Sentiment score dropped below neutral in 12 minutes. Ava nodded slightly. Time to speak, she said, but not me. What do you want to release? The footage, Ava said, all of it. Raw, unedited. Let the public judge. We stay silent. Serena hesitated. You sure? I'm not here for applause, Ava replied. I'm here for accountability. Within moments, the videos began appearing on news sites, on social platforms, shared by major influencers. The narrative flipped with stunning speed. Ava Brooks wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't even just a CEO. She had become a symbol of composure, of restraint, of leadership. And Karen? She became a meme. Screenshots of her shouting, I feel unsafe while blocking a seat with a $25,000 bag were plastered across feeds. Satirical captions followed. When your purse is more welcome than a person. Entitlement in first class, starring Karen Whitmore. Oops, she bought the bag but forgot to buy perspective. Inside Regalis Airlines HQ, chaos reigned. Legal was scrambling. Marketing was on lockdown. Investors were demanding answers. The board, silent for months, was suddenly scheduling daily calls. And in a small, quiet VIP lounge at LAX, Ava sat alone, sipping tea. Her phone buzzed again. Serena. Stock down 4%. Board requesting direct meeting. Karen's been officially banned from all affiliated airlines. Internal disciplinary actions pending for gate staff. We've also received outreach from major media. Ava replied with one word. Decline. Because this wasn't about headlines. It was about sending a message. And that message had already taken flight. The boardroom at Regalis Airlines headquarters in Manhattan was colder than usual, not in temperature but in tone. The sleek glass walls seemed to echo the tension within. Around the long obsidian table sat 12 directors, most older white men, some visibly irritated, others glued to the data flooding their tablets. Mark Helton, the once unshakable CEO, now sat at the far end, his jaw clenched, suit disheveled, eyes hollow. "Let's not overreact," he said, voice low but strained. "It's just social media. It'll blow over." "It's not just social media," snapped Angela Ruiz, head of shareholder relations. "It's public trust, consumer confidence, our credibility. You let your staff humiliate our owner." "She never identified herself," Mark shot back. "She bought a seat like anyone else. No one knew who she was." "That's the problem," said Evan Kim, the company's COO. "It shouldn't have mattered who she was." A heavy silence followed. Angela leaned forward. "You let a gate agent humiliate a black woman in front of an entire cabin, and then you let your PR team issue a blanket statement as if it were some minor inconvenience. Now the video's everywhere, and it's not just viral, it's moral." Before Mark could respond, the door opened. Serena Blake walked in, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. "Ms. Brooks won't be joining," she announced, "but she sent this." She placed her tablet in the center of the table. One tap and a video began to play. It was security footage. Not of the flight, but of a closed-door meeting from 4 weeks ago. In it, Mark was seen mocking the airline's new equity training initiative. "I don't care what the consultants say," past Mark muttered on the video. "We don't need a policy shift. We need to stop giving passengers excuses to play victim." The room went dead quiet. Then came a second clip. This time, an audio recording of Mark approving a hush deal with a past employee, another discrimination incident buried. "You signed off on this?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark didn't answer. His face was ashen. Angela stood. "There's going to be a vote." But before she could speak again, Serena's voice cut through the tension. "There's more." She tapped again. A third video began. It showed Ava sitting in a quiet interview with a local non-profit media outlet. No makeup, no pretense, just honesty. When people say, "Why didn't you pull rank?" they don't understand. "That's the problem," Ava said. "I didn't want to be treated well because I'm a CEO. I wanted to see if the system treats people fairly. What happened on that plane is what happens to black women every day, except they don't have the luxury of a boardroom to fight back. That's why I stayed quiet. That's why I let the camera roll. This isn't just about me. It never was." Back in the boardroom, no one moved. No one could. Angela finally broke the silence. Effective immediately, Mark Helton is relieved of his duties. Motion to vote? The hands went up. Unanimous. Serena stood still as the board processed the fallout. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. It was Ava. Release statement. Full accountability. No spin. Back in Los Angeles, Ava walked through a quiet hangar where her father used to work. The walls still smelled like jet fuel and metal. She paused beside an old toolbox, fingers brushing over its surface. Her mother had told her stories of how her father would shine shoes at the same airport before becoming a mechanic. That's why she never pulled rank. Because legacy wasn't power, it was responsibility. Her phone buzzed again. News alert. Regali's CEO removed after internal scandal. New leadership expected to reflect inclusive values. She didn't smile, but she finally exhaled. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about reckoning. And this one had just begun. The sun had barely risen over LAX, casting a golden hue on the tarmac, but Terminal 5 was already buzzing. Not from travelers, but from reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed. A crowd of journalists clustered outside a closed-off area near Gate 52. Inside, Ava Brooks stood at the center of it all, flanked by Serena and two representatives from the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division. Her blazer was simple, charcoal gray, hair pulled back into a low bun, no makeup, no armor, just presence. Across from her sat Karen Whitmore, pale and visibly shaken, flanked by her lawyer. She wasn't wearing the arrogant expression she'd had at the gate that day. No designer bag in hand now, only a nervous tremble in her wrist. "This isn't a court," Ava said evenly, "but it is a space of accountability." The meeting had been requested by DOT officials after national backlash reached critical mass. The agency wanted to use Ava's case as a pilot for enforcing new anti-discrimination compliance checks on major airlines. Ava had insisted on one condition. The gate agent had to be in the room. Karen cleared her throat. I was overwhelmed. It was a busy flight. I didn't recognize you." Ava didn't blink. "That's the point. You weren't supposed to." Karen's lawyer leaned in. "Ms. Whitmore is prepared to offer an apology." Ava held up a hand. "I'm not here for her apology. I'm here to ask why it happened, and how many others like me didn't have the resources to fight back." A heavy silence followed. Serena passed out a thin file to the DOT reps. "We've compiled data from internal complaints at Regalis over the past 6 years. There's a pattern. Black women disproportionately reassigned, rebooked, or flagged for secondary verification at boarding." One of the DOT officials, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, nodded. "This is damning." "Let's make sure it leads to something," Ava said, "because I'm not going to keep pretending this was isolated." Karen didn't act alone. She acted in a system that rewarded her instincts. Karen lowered her head. For the first time, shame seemed to sink in. As the meeting closed, the DOT announced publicly that Regalis Airlines would face a full audit and implement mandatory civil rights compliance training. The airline released a new statement, this time reviewed and signed by the board, with language that acknowledged systemic issues, not just individual misconduct. But Ava wasn't done. That night, she appeared on Real Voices, a nationally syndicated news show hosted by Jamal Dean, a former civil rights attorney turned journalist. The set was sleek, intimate, the lighting soft. "You could have stayed anonymous," Jamal said. "You're a CEO. You didn't have to go public." Ava nodded. "But if I didn't, nothing would have changed. This wasn't about my seat. It was about how quickly people believe black women don't belong." Jamal leaned forward. "And now?" Ava exhaled slowly. Now I want to make sure the next woman who looks like me doesn't need a camera or a title to be treated like a human being." The broadcast went viral overnight. Clips of Ava's statement were shared by celebrities, activists, and even other CEOs. Hashtags like #HatEverySeatCounts and #HatFlyFair began trending. Within 48 hours, 3 other major airlines preemptively released equity plans of their own. But perhaps most surprising of all was an anonymous email Ava received the next morning. Subject line, "I was wrong," from karen.bu@outlook.com. The message was brief. "I know I don't deserve a reply, but watching you speak made me realize how much I've ignored. I've booked a meeting with HR, and I'm stepping away from frontline duty. It's not your job to forgive me, but I'm going to do better." Ava read the message twice. She didn't respond. Instead, she closed her laptop and looked out her window at the city skyline. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, weary smile. Change wasn't loud, it was persistent. And sometimes it started with a seat someone said you didn't deserve. The ceremony was quiet, held in a private hall inside Regalis Airline's newly renamed Diversity and Equity Center in Atlanta, a building that hadn't existed 3 months ago. The plaque read, "Ava Brooks Leadership Hall, dedicated to the relentless pursuit of justice in the skies." It was surreal, standing in a room full of executives, advocates, former skeptics, and even a few anonymous whistleblowers, all gathered for the unveiling of a facility born from a gate agent's arrogance and a black woman's refusal to accept silence. Ava took a breath and stepped up to the mic. She wore a deep burgundy dress, elegant but firm, and her voice rang out not with anger, but with resolve. "3 months ago, I was asked to give up my seat because someone's designer bag was considered more valuable than my presence. That moment was small, petty, quiet, but like so many small injustices, it was part of something much larger, a system that makes decisions before you even speak." She paused, letting that truth sink into the wood-paneled walls and into the uncomfortable hearts of those who needed to hear it most. Today, that small moment has sparked a bigger one. Not just for me, but for all the people who've been told, subtly or blatantly, that they don't belong. Let this place be more than a name on a door. Let it be a mirror and a megaphone. Let it be proof that voices raised together can't be ignored. The applause was steady, respectful, but it was Serena, standing quietly near the back of the room, who gave Ava the nod that meant more than any ovation. As guests mingled and took selfies beside the plaque, a man in his mid-40s approached Ava with a hesitant smile. "Ms. Brooks, I'm Darren Miller, former gate supervisor at Regalis. I used to train people like Karen Whitmore." Ava turned, her expression unreadable. "I came to say thank you. I didn't step up when I should have. But after all this, I've rejoined the airline as a compliance trainer. I'm doing the work now, because of what you did." Ava studied him, then gave a small nod. "Then don't thank me, just keep showing up." The moment the ceremony ended, Ava stepped outside into the sunlight, her heels clicking against the polished tile. Reporters were waiting, but she had no statement prepared, no PR team flanking her. Just herself. One of the journalists shouted, "Ms. Brooks, will you ever fly Regalis again?" She smiled softly. "Maybe, but not because I need their seat, because I've earned every mile." Weeks later, the fallout continued rippling. Karen Whitmore officially resigned, not quietly, but with a public op-ed titled, "The Bag Wasn't the Problem, I Was." In it, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She offered transparency. She admitted to years of unchecked bias. She called out the blind spots in company training. She urged the airline industry to use her as an example of what needed to end, not what could be redeemed. The article shocked everyone. But Ava, reading it over her morning tea, didn't flinch. "Redemption's not the point," she whispered. "Truth is." Months passed, and yet Ava's story didn't fade. It became case study material in law schools, DEI panels, even corporate retreats. Her quote, "You weren't supposed to recognize me," was etched into murals and printed on tote bags by college students across the country. But Ava wasn't chasing legacy. One evening, she returned to her childhood neighborhood in Jackson, Mississippi, and hosted a quiet mentorship circle with young black girls who had dreams of aerospace, law, and politics. She didn't bring her awards or titles, just time, stories, truth. "You don't have to wait for someone to give you a seat," she told them. "Sometimes you make your own table." One girl raised her hand and asked, "What if they still try to kick you out?" Ava grinned. "Then you walk back in, with cameras, lawyers, and the receipts." They laughed, but the lesson stuck. And finally, in a twist no one saw coming, Regalis announced a board restructuring. Serena Calloway, after turning down 5 offers from competing airlines, accepted a new position, Chief Equity Officer. At her first press conference, when asked what changed her mind, she simply said, "I followed the woman who reminded us all what flying with dignity looks like." As the screen fades to black, Ava's voice carries through one final time. "Justice isn't loud, it's consistent. It shows up when no one's looking, doesn't ask for credit, it demands change." A call to action message follows. If Ava's story moved you, share it. Speak up. Push back. Don't wait to be powerful to do the right thing. Your voice is already enough. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe, like, and comment. Let's keep justice flying high.